Welcome to the Survivor to Thriver show with your happiness expert, Samia Bano. Do you feel stuck, silent, and stressed? Is something hurting your heart and soul? Are you burning yourself out? If so, you are in the right place because this is the podcast people from all over the world join in to learn exactly how to stop suffering and start living with inner peace and joy. Let's get started. Hey, welcome back to the Survivor to Thriver show. Very happy to have you join me today. Actually, today we are going to be continuing to talk about domestic violence, and more specifically continuing from the points I was making last episode, where I gave you a scenario of John and Megan, where John and Megan have been in a relationship for a few weeks, but John has realized that he no longer wants to be in the relationship. He actually wants to break up the relationship. However, every time he talks to Megan about their breaking up, she responds by crying or getting angry, and it makes John feel very uncomfortable and very guilty, and he's not sure about what to say and how to proceed, and he reacts by sort of backing away, backing up, retreating. So they're still together, but his heart's not really into it anymore, and he feels really stuck. And so we're looking at the question of, well, first of all, is there anything abusive in John's behavior in this scenario with the information that I've given you? And I, in my opinion, I say no. There's nothing abusive in John's behavior. Because abusive behavior is behavior where you're trying to manipulate, you're trying to control someone else, you're trying to exercise power over someone else. You may be using tactics and behaving in ways that make the other person feel bad about themselves or their relationships, make them feel afraid of you. But it's really the one of the key aspects of abusive behavior is that intention to manipulate or exercise power and control over the other person. And John is certainly not fitting that description. So no, I would not say that John is behaving in an abusive way. Now, if you look at Megan's behavior, you know, the way that she responds to John every time he tries to break up with her, with crying or getting really angry at him, in my assessment, we don't have enough information in this scenario, the way I've described it, to be able to say that Megan is being abusive, or that the relationship between John and Megan is abusive. However, her behavior is concerning because it's not healthy. In a healthy relationship, we give each other the space and the freedom to make our own decisions, and if one person finds that they're no longer committed and no longer wanting to be in the relationship, and if you are if both people in the relationship are in a healthy state of mind and heart, then the mature response is to allow that person the space they need, to let them go. You know that saying that we have, there's of, it's like, if you love someone, let them go, and if they love you too, they will come back. So there's a lot of wisdom in that notion. The idea that, you cannot force someone to love you. You cannot force someone to be with you. In a healthy relationship, both people choose to be in that relationship because they want to be in that relationship, because they feel that it is something good for them, that's helping them meet their needs, and so on and so forth. So the way Megan is behaving is not healthy, but we don't have enough information to call this behavior abusive, or to be able to say that the relationship is abusive. So what would be enough information? How could we know is that whether Megan's behavior is abusive or not? What additional information might we, if we had that information, that we could say, oh yes, Megan's being abusive, or not? So this is where we have to understand that when it comes to being able to recognize whether a behavior is abusive or not, or whether a relationship has become abusive or not, because those are two separate things. So that sometimes we can engage in a behavior that is abusive, but the relationship as a whole may not be abusive. Or that the relationship as a whole may be abusive, but not every single behavior that takes place within the context of that relationship may be abusive, right? So let's kind of look into this because it's very, very important. It's a point that when not understood, when a distinction not understood, or when we don't understand how to make this evaluation of when a behavior or relationship is or is not abusive, it gets us into a lot of trouble. And I've discussed some of the ways in which it can get us in trouble in the last few episodes that we have done. But one really quick example, just in case you haven't heard or listened to some of the previous episodes. Although if you haven't, I highly encourage you to sort of go back and listen to the last few episodes, so that you can get a deeper understanding of the issues here. But today I'll give you a quick example. So, in general, even in the most healthy, happy relationships, it is very normal and in fact even natural for there to be conflict. Certainly once in a while. And conflict, when we are having conflict, oftentimes it's a situation that's very stressful. There may be some serious challenges that need to be resolved. People may be feeling scared, insecure, angry. All kinds of things can be going on. And so oftentimes when we are going through that kind of stressful situation, it's not uncommon that we may even find ourselves acting in ways, saying things, doing things that we wouldn't normally do. But we do it in that moment of anger or frustration or stress. And the way we behave or the way that we talk may even be hurtful. And may even be harmful. But again, one of the important lessons that we learn in how to create healthy, happy relationships is to practice forgiveness and practice patience and tolerance with each other. Without forgiveness, without patience, without tolerance of each other's weaknesses and flaws, no relationship could survive. So, as a rule, as a general rule, the practice of forgiveness and patience and tolerance is absolutely crucial and very, very commendable and necessary. However, in the context of abusive relationships, the practice of these very virtues can oftentimes be a part of the problem. Not in and of themselves, see, but in the context of how we are analyzing and understanding the situation. And we are applying, basically, it's a problem in the sense that we're applying the wrong tool in the scenario. It's like patience, tolerance, forgiveness. These are all tools. Like, if you think of them as tools that we can use to help us create a healthy relationship, well, in the context of an abusive relationship, these tools are just not applicable. These are just not the right tools to be using. Why? Because let's really think about what abuse is, what the definition of abuse is, which, as I was sharing with you, I believe a couple of episodes ago, abusive behavior is behavior where one person has an agenda to manipulate and to exercise power and control over another. Meaning that what they're doing, the way they're behaving, their intentions are not, they're not good intentions. See, in a healthy relationship, a non-abusive relationship, when conflict emerges, we can assume that both parties involved they actually care about each other. They actually care about each other's well-being. And yes, I may want what I want, but I also care about the other person. And I'm willing to compromise for the sake of the relationship, or collaborate for the sake of making sure that not only are my needs met, but my partner's needs are met too. We can make an assumption that I care about the well-being of our relationship, and so on and so forth. But in an abusive relationship, none of these assumptions are true. See, it's like one partner in an abusive relationship is all about take, and they're not willing to give. They're not wanting to give. And their agenda is, I want what I want. And I'm going to do whatever it takes to get what I want. So if that means manipulating the other person, I'm going to manipulate. Whether it's with emotional blackmail, or whether it's by using other forms of emotional abuse, like playing on the other person's insecurities, making them feel bad, or whether it's by exercising power and control in a hurtful, harmful way, like getting physically violent, or by becoming economically, financially controlling, or by becoming sexually abusive, violent, or by isolating the other person so that they feel alone, they feel more weak, more helpless, and therefore more liable to give in to whatever it is that you want. The abuse, the forms that of manipulation, of exercising power and control, can take so many different forms. And the person, the abuser, will use any or all of these different forms of abusive behavior without regard to how that will impact the other person, how that will make them feel, how that will hurt them, harm them. Except the only reason they care about how these behaviors are going to impact the other person is if they're going to help them get what they want, then they're good. They're going to, from their perspective, the abuser's perspective, anything that helps the abuser get what they want is justified in their mind. And if something doesn't work, then, they'll move on and use another tactic. So now when we're talking about being patient, being forgiving, being tolerant, the reason these become inappropriate tools, if you are at the receiving end of the abuse, is that, let's say from a place of wanting to exercise patience and tolerance, you give in to what that abusive person wants when they behave with anger, or if they're being less obviously manipulative or abusive, and they're using more emotional blackmailing kind of strategies, and you respond to that by retreating, by giving in to what the other person is saying, then basically what you're doing is showing the abuser by your behavior that using those techniques is effective. That when they behave with anger or when they emotionally blackmail, that those behaviors are effective in getting you to do what they want. So in the abuser's mind, those behaviors become justified for them to continue to use. It's like, oh, now I know that this works with this person, so I'm going to keep using it, and it's great that I know this now. So in fact, the more patient you become, the more tolerance you try to show, the more you try to forgive and so forth, the more you end up encouraging the other person to continue in their agenda of manipulation and exercising power and control over you. So that's why oftentimes what you really need to do when someone else is behaving in ways that are hurtful and harmful to you, violating your boundaries, or make you feel unsafe, is for you to be more assertive. and let the other person know that the way they're behaving is not okay. And that it's not going to work, that is not going to be an effective way for them to get what they want. That if they want to get what they want, they need to be willing to compromise, to negotiate in an open, honest manner. Be willing to give and take. But most importantly, be willing to give, right? Give, because they're on an agenda to take, but they have to be willing to give as well. So you have to show them with your behavior what is going to work in terms of what is going to win your cooperation. And by the way, cooperation is not a one-way street, right? Again, give and take, give and take. In cooperation, there is give and take. So this is a very, very important point to understand. So now the question, we come back to the question of, so how do you know when a behavior is abusive or when a relationship is abusive? So the simple answer to this is that if a behavior is physically or sexually violent, hurtful, harmful, it's always abusive. Always. I mean, I don't care if it's the one and only time someone, ever raises their hand on someone. It's abusive. There's no justification for any kind of violence. There's, ever. Now, there are some circumstances, again, like I said, that may be high stress, high pressure. We all make mistakes. We may all, have at various times in our lives acted in ways that are hurtful, harmful, even abusive in this kind of context. However, that does not mean that we have an abusive personality in general, or that our relationship as a whole is abusive. It just means that I did something in this instance that was very wrong, that was in fact abusive. I need to recognize my mistake and not repeat it. So even if someone hits someone, yes, you can recover from that, both as the person who has committed the abusive act and the person who was at the receiving end of it. You can heal from something like that and move ahead in your relationship and have it become a healthy relationship if you're willing to learn from what happened and improve things for the future, do better in the future. When it comes to mental and emotional, verbal forms of hurtful, harmful behaviors, they become abusive when there is an intention to manipulate, to control, to exercise power over, to dominate, to hurt, or to make someone afraid, those kinds of things. So intentions matter. Why is someone behaving in the way they're behaving? Now, when we talk about having to consider intentions, the problem is that we're not mind readers. So we cannot always accurately assess what the other person's intention is. In fact, we can never 100% be sure about what anyone else's intention is. We can only ever know our own intentions fully. So when we want to evaluate whether someone's behavior is abusive or not, we can't just depend on our best guess of what their intention is to make an accurate assessment. So what then we have to do is instead focus on the behavior and look to see if the behavior that feels hurtful to us, that feels harmful to us, if that behavior is part of a larger pattern. Is this like a once in a while thing or a one-time incident that someone has behaved towards us in this way? Or is this something that they do over and over and over again? And not only is it something that's just happened once or many times, but it's like even after the behavior has happened, how does this other person react? Do they take responsibility for their behavior? Do they realize, do they recognize that what they've done is wrong, that what they did was hurtful, that it was harmful? Do they take corrective action? Like, do they make a real good, honest effort to change, to do better? Or not? So what we see is that in cases of abusive relationships, and when we can really look at a mental emotional behavior tactic, and when we can say that, oh, this is abusive as a behavior, or that this relationship has become abusive, is when we can detect a pattern of behaving in a way where you're manipulating, you're controlling, you're making the other person feel bad, or at least that you have that intention to make that other person feel bad, make them feel afraid, and so on and so forth. So I'm looking at the time. I'm going to go ahead, wrap up here for today. And next episode, I'm going to get a little more deeply into examining this idea of the pattern that can exist, that generally does exist in the context of abusive relationships. So once you understand this pattern, if you detect this pattern in your own relationship, or in a relationship you're observing among your friends or family members, then you know that relationship has become abusive. Okay, so again, you might see a one-time incident of someone reacting in a hurtful, harmful way, and that may not be enough for you to make your determination as to whether that relationship is abusive or not. But if you see a red flag, if you see a danger sign, then it's like, okay, if it's appropriate for you to do a little bit more investigation, get a little more information about the relationship and how things have been in that relationship, and see if you can detect this pattern that I'm going to share with you. It's called the cycle of violence. So if you can detect that pattern existing in the relationship, then you can be pretty sure in your assessment that that relationship has in fact turned abusive, and the behavior that you observed was an instance of that abuse occurring. So with that, I want to remind you that, look, if this is something you find yourself struggling with, please do not continue to struggle with it on your own. Reach out for help and support. And you know that I'm one person you can reach out to. Just go to my website at www.academyofthriving.com, click on the Contact Us page, and you will see how we can connect. So until next time, I wish you lots of peace and joy.